Hi everyone, and welcome back to the George Collection. I am Rachel with WRITESIDE Blonde. Today, before I get into the article, I would like to take a second and show you a really cool gift that I got last week from Mr. Vincent Fusca. This is the shirt he wore in the Stop the Steal March in DC. I'm very honored to have it, and I will take excellent care of it. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but he is running for Senate in Pennsylvania. So if you have the capability to, please go to fuscaforsenate.com and donate any amount of money that you can, whether it's $5, $10, $15, every little bit helps. Let's help this great patriot win a Senate seat in Pennsylvania. Okay, moving on to the article for this week. We are going to be looking at the November 1999 issue that is about Hillary coming clean. Remember in one of the last episodes, I talked about the headlines not really being indicative of what the article is about. So this one, for instance, says Hillary comes clean. It sounds like she's guilty of something and she's coming clean, when in fact the article is not about that. It is a very long article. It's about 15 pages long of small writing. So to spare you listening to my voice for that long, I'm going to just pick and choose little bits from that article to give you an idea of what the article was about, and also just kind of show you what was happening back then, and you can compare and contrast to what's happening right now. Today's February 18th. This week, some interesting news came out from the Durham report regarding Hillary Clinton and her lawyer, Michael Sussman. That's a fitting name, by the way, Sussman, because he's sus. Sorry, I had to. When I started the Hillary Clinton series, I had no idea that John Durham was going to be coming out with this report, so it's kind of interesting that it's all kind of coinciding. I also think it's safe to say now that Hillary Clinton is no stranger to scandal. In one of my previous episodes, I think it was episode 2, I talked about the Whitewater scandal. Of course, we all know about the email scandal. We know about Benghazi, and now there's this. So we'll see how this one plays out. And without further ado, let's read. The article is called Hillary's Hidden Power. It's by Carl Anthony. I thought it was interesting in the feature section. It just gives a little blurb of what the article will uncover. So I'll read that first. After the 1994 healthcare debacle, critics expected Hillary Clinton to pack up shop. Instead, she has transformed herself into a behind-the-scenes power player. As she prepares to run for the Senate, it's clear that keeping her agenda under wraps was part of her plan. All right, moving on to the article. On November 29, 1994, 3 weeks after the Republican Party seized control of Congress for the first time in 40 years, Hillary Rodham Clinton addressed a symposium on the role of First Ladies. In the gold-encrusted ballroom of Washington's Mayflower Hotel, a hushed audience had gathered expecting to hear Hillary ooze contrition, the congressional defeat of her ambitious agenda for health care reforms and the Republicans' massive victory had become synonymous in the public's imagination. But when a poised and confident Hillary began to speak, it was obvious that the First Lady had no intention of offering the expected mea culpas. She would continue to be active in public life, she declared. If she did otherwise, she added, my husband and friends would probably have me committed. I, for better or worse, have spoken out on public issues for 25 years. Some kind of First Lady amnesia would not have been very credible. Such conviction was not isolated to large gatherings in front of television cameras. At a White House dinner a few weeks later, Hillary was in a similarly feisty mood, telling a guest, listen, I'm a big girl. I can take the hits. I don't mind a real debate on issues. Yet, of course, things would change after November 1994. And in the months that followed, even the stubborn Hillary had to realize that all the criticism and vitriol was not really about her health care plan. It was about Hillary herself. The role she had assumed as the engine of reform has sparked a national debate on the power she wielded within the White House. Her harshest enemies, the Hillary-hating crowd of newly elected Republicans on Capitol Hill, were determined to cast her as the most Machiavellian presidential spouse since Edith Wilson took control of the presidency of her infirm husband, Woodrow Wilson, in 1919. To them, she was Lady Clinton, whispering in the ear of her vacillating husband as the couple lay down to sleep at night, ignoring her husband's infidelities because she was more interested in acquiring power for herself. In the face of such adversity, Hillary recognized that she would have to adapt. She could hold her head high at functions and deliver hollow bromides about issues, but that wasn't why she had come to Washington. If she was going to get anything done, she would have to change the way she was doing it to make sure that the controversy surrounding her persona would not doom the changes she wanted to make. As Hillary says today, this was the time of the most intense attacks from Congress. So it was not likely that I was going to testify on anything then. No longer could she act as a sort of unofficial cabinet member empowered by her husband to take on the administration's biggest challenges. Instead, she would master the behind-the-scenes levers of power, building relationships with the White House staff, cabinet agencies, particularly female cabinet members and trustworthy friends on Capitol Hill. Flushed with their victories over Hillary and congressional Democrats, the Republicans failed to realize just how successful she would become in this evolution. The inside the Beltway media, unable to get close to Hillary and bored by the serious issues she was working on, never paid her doings much attention either. She has been floundering around in the last couple of years to try to find some project for herself, Washington social doyen Sally Quinn said on Meet the Press in February 1998. The real problem for Hillary is her record, Newsweek pundit Jonathan Alter wrote in March 1999, assessing her Senate campaign. She doesn't have one. Yet by appearing more like a traditional first lady and removing herself from the glare of the media, a former staff member says she could get things done. Since 1994, Hillary has accomplished more than many, perhaps most, members of Congress, particularly in the areas of childcare, human rights, and healthcare. But so adeptly has she disguised her influence in Washington that as she prepares to run for Daniel Patrick Moynihan's New York Senate seat next year, there has been no sustained review of exactly what Hillary Clinton has achieved in the White House. I think one of the reasons there hasn't been much coverage of what I've done is that there hasn't been one theme to my work, she explains. It would take a certain amount of effort to follow what I've done, and that's just never part of political reporting. But in terms of how I spent my days and what I did, I thought that it was pretty much a continuation of what I have always done, working on the same kind of issues, trying to raise them, trying to be strategic and thinking about how to be effective in promoting them, looking for allies. And I resist labeling myself because it's so limiting. I'm realistic, I'm pragmatic, I'm optimistic, and I think I'm patriotic. Hillary's beliefs and commitment to them haven't changed since 1994, but her tactics have, and unlike her plan to reform healthcare, they've succeeded. I'm skipping a part of the article that talks about Hillary Clinton going to a movie and being compared to Madonna. Hillary is clearly exasperated by such portrayals. You know, people ask me all the time, what has it been like for you here, she says. Certainly, there have been some painful times, some challenging times, but when I look back, what I remember and what I have enjoyed are all the incredible opportunities. I feel blessed about that. I had an opportunity and I had an obligation, and I enjoyed what I did every day. I liked trying to help other people. That desire to be perceived as a public servant who can transcend personal crisis is not disingenuous. Though her sense of duty can come across as patronizing noblesse oblige, Hillary has been devoted to public service since her teens. She learned the virtue of service from her Methodist father, Hugh Rodham, who took the family on tours of the ghettos of their hometown of Chicago. I'm skipping some more of the article that just talks about her childhood. Hillary was not a hippie of the 60s. The wildest personal thing she ever did was paint a flower on her arm, only to wash it off a few hours later. There are no stories of any kind suggesting that she used drugs or indulged in free love, even by association. Devastated by the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., she joined other students in a memorial march and wore an armband, but she never took part in sit-ins or riots. During the 1968 Chicago Democratic Convention, she went to observe the riots between anti-war demonstrators and the police, not to participate. She did not want to destroy the status quo. She wanted to wake it up and have it take responsibility. She wasn't anti-establishment. She was re-establishment. Recognizing that instead of insisting women be given power, they should be allowed to work to get it. When she arrived in the White House, Hillary was eager to break the precedent. She took an office in the West Wing with the president's staff and placed her aides, except for employees of the social office, in the old executive office building next door. Then, in the winter of 1993, the president announced that his wife would head a White House task force to reform healthcare. Hillary would marshal the advice of more than 500 experts and a host of aides and present legislation to Congress that would guarantee healthcare for every American. The message was clear. Hillary was involved in the executive branch of the United States government. She had yet to learn that Washington wasn't ready for what critics would sneeringly call a dual presidency. Nor could she have realized that the Republicans would make her role as reformer more contentious than the legislation itself. Hillary herself will occasionally attend senior staff meetings in the West Wing when the issues under discussion are strongly related to her expertise, such as children and health care. She will listen to somebody saying that's not going to work. Then she will say, well, how do we make it work? Verveer says. If she feels strongly about something and you're sitting with her in a meeting, you'll know that she feels strongly about it. In one session with the cabinet secretary this year, Hillary said flatly, "It's unconscionable that the regulations aren't out yet. Why don't we have this done? What are they going to say in 2 years' time?" She takes these gatherings seriously. "Well, we had the meeting," she'll say. "There were promises made. Let's see what happens now." The exchange of information between the president's staff and Hillary flows both ways. The president's domestic policy aides keep her informed of pending legislation that they know will be of interest to her. Or if they're working on an issue that they know she has strong feelings about or expertise in, they'll request her opinion, as they did last spring in the wake of the shooting in Littleton, Colorado. When a tough decision has to be made, she's going to have the opportunity to offer strategic advice, Lou says. Her views are one of the important factors as you think things through. Still, there's no evidence that the West Wing capitulates to please the boss's wife. What's more likely is that the president's advisors will meet with Hillary to get a read on how the president is thinking about an issue. One presidential aide says the Clintons think so similarly on important issues that she can be a good sounding board to the way he'll approach an issue. Bill Clinton is an encyclopedia of policy, but even he concedes that his wife is better versed on children's issues than he is. He sees this as one area where she has tremendous expertise, says Matthew Melmed, who is an informal advisor to Hillary and the director of 0 to 3, an organization that focuses on child development issues. He defers to her on this stuff. Hillary's interest in children dates to her first year at Yale Law School, when she read an article in Time about Marian Wright Edelman, the children's rights advocate who headed a fledgling Washington lobby called the Washington Research Project. After working with Edelman, she was referred to work with Mondale, and after Mondale, she was researching all kinds of things like migrant problems in housing, sanitation, health, and education. Returning to Yale for her second year, Hillary volunteered at the university's Child Studies Center, where she befriended Sally Provence, who was pioneering research on brain development in early childhood. She also volunteered in New Haven Hospital, where she worked on cases of child abuse, and at the city's legal services provided free legal aid to the poor. Hillary went on to write a chapter in Joseph Goldstein's book about children's legal rights and adoption. Her chapter for the book would be among the first writings to chronicle the judicial system's failure to address child abuse. It also laid down a new paradigm of adoptive law, that a child's happiness mattered more than considerations such as wealth, birth, family, race, or his or her potential adoptive parents. One of Hillary's first legal aid cases involved a black foster care child who was up for adoption. Hillary successfully argued that an older, low-income white woman who had been the foster parent for the child for 2 years should be able to adopt the girl. The woman and the child had clearly become a family, Hillary said. Rather than being shuttled off to another foster home to wait for wealthier adoptive parents of similar racial makeup, the girl should stay in that home. When asked Hillary what her greatest achievement is, she cites her role in initiating and shepherding the Adoption and Safe Families Act of 1997 through Congress. Helping to pass that bill has given her, she says, as much satisfaction as anything that I've done. The genesis of the bill can be traced to the aftermath of the 1994 midterm elections. Soon after he became Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich declared that orphanages, like so many institutions of the Victorian era, weren't as grisly and novelist as liberals had made them out to be. Sensing an opportunity to damage Gingrich politically, Hillary seized on the remark. In an article she wrote in Newsweek in January of 1995, she declared that Gingrich's comment was absurd. She went on to research orphanages and really clung on to the adoption piece of legislation. On November 13th, Congress passed the bill. 4 days later, in a huge White House ceremony, the president signed it. More than a year later, Hillary unveiled part of the president's 2000 budget, $300 million to support unadopted, aging children with housing, daily chores, and health coverage. Since then, a new bill sponsored by Nancy Johnson and Benjamin Cardin has passed the House in a near-unanimous vote, the Foster Care Independence Bill, which will help older unadopted children make the transition to adulthood, was introduced by Senators John Chafee of Rhode Island and Jay Rockefeller of West Virginia and awaits debate in the Senate. It's a powerful subject if you're into it, Rockefeller says, but it's one in which you need someone to take you into it. Hillary does that. When it comes to children and family issues, I don't think there's a more informed, passionate person in the country. The article continues on, talking more about how she's partnered with businesses to make differences in children's lives. Since 1993, Hillary has made 51 trips to foreign countries, usually on her own. She is the most widely traveled First Lady in history. The article goes on to talk about Hillary's Senate run. Several factors prompted the First Lady to run. For the last couple of years, I had intended to live in New York after the White House, she says. My mind has already moved to that. Long before anyone talked to me about running for office, I just imagined I would be living there and working there. It seemed serendipitous that what I intended to do, live in New York, coincided with what people were urging me to do. Hillary has also come to realize the role of the Senate in many of the issues that she has already begun work on. I have seen in the last few years the importance of what goes on in the Senate, she explains. Time and again, important decisions about our future were made by one vote or a handful of votes in the Senate. She names Vice President Gore's tie-breaking vote for the administration's deficit reduction plan in 1983 and the slim margin on the 1994 crime bill as examples of the chamber's role. Hillary goes on to compare herself to Dolly Madison and really looks up to Dolly Madison, and she talks about how Mrs. Madison was a great hostess and could bring people together. It's not over yet. In the next 12 months, the First Lady cum candidate has an ambitious agenda. She reels off sensible gun control, doing what needs to be done on Social Security and Medicare, laying the groundwork for diminishing and then eliminating the national debt, the pension proposal, raise the minimum wage again. The last time I spoke with her, the First Lady seemed increasingly more comfortable mentioning her own work than she had in previous conversations. On issues close to her, such as adoption, child welfare, and the welfare-to-work transition, she will continue to push. But there are new issues as well. I've seen how important farming is in my travels around New York because upstate New York has been lagging behind the rest of the state in job creation and income growth, she says. After all the years of listening, Hillary is finally finding her own voice. And that does it for that article of Hillary Comes Clean from November of 1999. If one were to follow the scandals of the Clintons from Whitewater to the most current one, it's kind of like watching a car accident and the person who's at fault just keeps hitting people, sideswiping everyone, gets in this car accident and walks out completely unscathed. Meanwhile, everyone else is wondering what just happened. That reminds me of what is happening with the Clintons. It seems like they're involved in all these things, but nothing ever happens. But the truth always comes out. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'm looking forward to next week's last Hillary cover. I'll see you then.
Which is a hoot of a magazine. I thought you were a lawyer.
I was.
What happened?
Well, we decided, actually taking a cue from folks like yourself and you around the 1992 election, that there was an opportunity here to change the definition of a political magazine. Certainly the way Americans were accessing information about politics and politicians was changing. Candidates were appearing on late night talk shows, on talk radio, on sitcoms, and there was a kind of a leveling process, and while the rest of media clearly had caught up with that, we felt that political magazines per se hadn't.
Your mother was a hell of an editor at Doubleday.
That's what I hear.
Would she have liked George?
I think she would have.